If you drive a car in the United States, your movements are probably being tracked. Not hypothetically, not someday in the future, right now. I'm a criminal defense attorney, and today I want to talk about how modern license plate cameras are used to collect and share your location data, why that matters for your constitutional rights, and what you can realistically do about it. And stick around, because at the end, I'll tell you exactly what to say if you're ever stopped because one of these alerts. This isn't paranoia. This isn't speculation. It's documented. It's widespread, and it's already harmed innocent people. Most people think of these devices as traffic cameras, something like red light cameras or speed cameras. But that's not what these are. They're automated license plate readers. They capture images of every vehicle that passes. Software then extracts the license plate number and attaches a time and location stamp. Many systems also log vehicle characteristics like make, model, roof racks, bumper stickers, or visible damage. That information doesn't just disappear. It's stored, it's searchable, and in many cases, it's shared. Those records often live in cloud databases owned by private companies. Police departments can search their own data, but they can also share with other departments. Private entities, like apartment complexes, gated communities, hospitals, or large retailers, can choose to share their data with law enforcement as well. So the system doesn't just reflect police activity. It reflects everyone who participates in the network, and it's getting more powerful. One of the biggest players in this space is a company called Flock Safety. They make license plate reader cameras that go well beyond just reading the license plate numbers. Flock uses what they call vehicle fingerprint technology. Their cameras use machine learning to categorize every vehicle that passes by the camera, not just by plate number, but by make, model, body type, and even distinguishing features like bumper stickers, roof racks, aftermarket wheels, or a broken headlight. Let's say that somebody reports a hit and run, but all they saw was a black Jeep Grand Cherokee with a broken headlight. An officer can type a plain language search into the Flock database searching for a black Jeep Grand Cherokee with a broken headlight and pull up every single vehicle matching that description that has passed by their camera. No plate number needed. This sounds useful for solving crimes, and it can be, but think about what that means for everyone else. Every distinguishing feature on your car, every dent, every sticker, every modification is being categorized. And that information is searchable by law enforcement, sometimes without a warrant, often without you ever knowing. Flock now operates in over 5,000 communities across 49 states. They claim to perform over 20 billion vehicle scans per month. That's not a traffic camera. That's a nationwide vehicle surveillance network. What the data reveals: one camera on one street doesn't tell you much, but dozens or hundreds across an entire city does. With enough coverage, officers can reconstruct patterns: where a vehicle is parked overnight, where it goes during the day, what locations it visits repeatedly, which other vehicles tend to appear at the same places at the same time. That's not a single snapshot. That's a history. And whether we call it tracking or not, the effect is the same. It allows the government to look backward in time and ask, where has this vehicle been? That matters because historically doing that required real effort: physical surveillance, a tail, a GPS, a warrant. When the system gets it wrong, the risks here are not theoretical. We've already seen what happens when these systems generate false alerts, and officers rely on them without independent verification. In Aurora, Colorado, a family was driving to a shopping center. Their vehicle was flagged by a license plate reader as stolen. Officers initiated a high-risk stop. Guns were drawn. Children were ordered out of the car and onto the pavement. But the alert was wrong. The plate had been misread. The vehicle was not stolen. The family had done nothing illegal. The city later paid a multi-million-dollar settlement. That case is often treated like an outlier. It shouldn't be. Similar incidents have happened in multiple states, different families, different police departments. Same underlying problem. A computer system generated an alert, officers treat it as reliable, escalation happens first, verification happens later, if at all. When the system is wrong, the consequences are immediate and severe. There's no rewind button for having guns pointed at you. There's no fix for trauma inflicted on children who are taught in that moment that police encounters can be terrifying, even if you've done nothing wrong at all. But license plates are public. Supporters of these systems usually respond that way. They say license plates are public. They say anyone can see your plate when you're driving. They say there's no reasonable expectation of privacy in public. But that argument misses the point. There's a fundamental difference between being observed once in public and having your movements recorded, stored, aggregated, and searched over time. Courts have recognized this distinction. In a 2018 case entitled Carpenter versus the United States, the Supreme Court addressed whether police needed a warrant to access months of a suspect's cell phone data. The government argued that it didn't because the data was in possession of a third party, the cell phone company, and the suspect had voluntarily shared it by using his phone. The Supreme Court disagreed. In a 5-4 decision, Chief Justice Roberts wrote that accessing 127 days of cell phone location data, nearly 13,000 individual data points, was a search under the Fourth Amendment. The court said that this kind of detailed, long-term location tracking gives the government near-perfect surveillance and reveals the privacies of life. It held that the government generally needs a warrant to obtain this type of data. That case was about cell phone records, but the logic applies directly to what the license plate reader networks are doing. Long-term location tracking reveals patterns that single observations do not. It can show where you sleep, where you work, who you associate with, what medical offices you visit, what religious institutions you attend, and what political activities you participate in. That's why courts have treated prolonged tracking as a serious constitutional issue, even when a single data point might seem harmless on its own. The law, however, is behind the technology. Carpenter was a landmark decision, but the court was careful to call it a narrow ruling. It addressed cell phone location data specifically. Automated license plate readers sit in a gray area that courts are only beginning to confront. Police agencies argue that they're not tracking people, they're tracking vehicles. They argue the data is collected in public. They argue it's just photographs. But the practical effect is the same. A searchable database of movements that can be queried after the fact, often without a warrant, and often without the person ever knowing. Now stay with me here, because this next part is where it gets really personal. Who else is looking at your data? Another major issue is data sharing. Journalists and civil rights organizations have obtained records showing that local license plate data has been accessed far beyond the department that originally collected it. In some cases, searches were labeled for immigration purposes. In others, federal agencies obtained access through partnerships or pilot programs. Even in states that try to restrict data sharing, enforcement often depends on contract language and audits that the public never see. The average person has no idea who can access this data, how often it's searched, or for what purposes. And even if every officer followed the rules perfectly, which we know doesn't happen, the structure of the system creates risk. Large databases invite misuse. We don't have to look far for an example. In Baldwin, Missouri, about 20 miles west of St. Louis, the police chief got in trouble when an investigation revealed that he had run more than 1,000 names through the Regional Justice Information System over a period of roughly 2.5 years. Regis is a criminal database used by law enforcement. It contains arrest records, criminal histories, driver's license information, sensitive personal data that's supposed to be private, and accessed only for legitimate law enforcement purposes. According to reporting by the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and Fox 2 News, many of those searches appeared to have nothing to do with legitimate police work. The people searched included people that lived near the chief, citizens who had spoken at public city council meetings, a former alderman who had been critical of the mayor, and an individual described in internal reports as an ex-wife, a daughter, and a Hispanic business owner. A class action lawsuit was filed. The Missouri Administrative Hearing Commission moved to take the chief's license, and most of the people whose names had been searched had no idea it had happened until journalists and attorneys started digging. That's the point. Policies usually prohibit this type of thing. Audits are supposed to catch it, but the data exists first and accountability comes later, if at all. There's also a broader social cost that's hard to measure. If people believe that their movements can be reconstructed after the fact, they may avoid lawful activity, protests, political meetings, religious services, support groups, anything that could later be scrutinized. That chilling effect doesn't require arrests. It doesn't require charges. It works simply by making people feel watched. So the obvious question becomes, what can you actually do about it? Let's start with what not to do. Altering, covering, obscuring, or modifying your license plate can get you stopped and cited. In some cases, it can escalate an encounter that otherwise would not have happened. I'm not advising that. What you can do is push for rules. States and cities decide whether these systems are adopted in the first place. They decide how long data is retained. They decide who it can be shared with and under what circumstances. Retention limits matter. Keeping data for weeks instead of years reduces the chance of abuse. Clear bans on sharing for certain purposes matter. Public votes in city council meetings matter more than people realize. You can also use public record laws. Police departments are often required to disclose contracts with vendors, data sharing agreements, audit logs, and usage policies. Those documents show who actually has access and how often the system is being used. They also show whether safeguards exist on paper or just on marketing materials. If license plate data is used against you in a criminal case, challenge it. Demand discovery. Ask how the alert was generated. Ask what verification steps were taken. Ask whether officers followed policy before escalating the stop. Ask how long the data had been stored and who else has access to it. Courts don't set limits in the abstract. They do it when lawyers force the issue in real cases with real consequences. And if you're stopped, here's what I promised at the beginning. Remember this. A computer alert is not proof. You do not have to explain where you've been. You do not have to consent to searches. You can remain silent and ask for a lawyer. Those rights don't disappear because a screen says possible hit. The bottom line, the technology isn't going away. That's the reality. The real question is whether it will operate with meaningful legal limits, transparency, and accountability, or whether mass location tracking will quietly become normal simply because it's convenient. Public safety does not require a permanent record of where everybody goes. And history shows that when surveillance power expands faster than legal safeguards, abuse follows. If you care about privacy, this isn't a future problem. It's already here. If this changed how you feel about license plate readers, hit subscribe. I break down how the law actually affects your daily life every week. And if you want to know more about your rights during a traffic stop, I've got a video for that. And I'll link it right here.